The College Football Playoff Committee, with their rankings on Tuesday, I don't think are showing a particular bias in every way. I think what they are doing, though, is proving that they are taking 3 factors over the 2 they should be using. The 2 they should be using are resume and eye test. That's how it's supposed to be. They say just eye test, but we all know it's resume, and I'm fine with that. What they're actually doing is prioritizing recency, the conference you play in, and the brand name of the program. Some combination of that. Now, I typically don't think when Big Ten and SEC teams get in, Dave, I don't think that some bias to the brand. I think those teams are actually better, and it just looks biased. I think you and I have talked about that in the past, right?
Yes.
It's like typically those teams just are the better teams, and you can break it down through schedule strength. This year, that's an exception. And if you look at the resume and if you look at the eye test, it contradicts some of these brands and big conference teams that we're about to talk about.
All right, let's get to the downs right here. Coop, what should we do?
Coop here. First down.
All right. First down is what? Caleb, Notre Dame over BYU and Miami. What problem do you have with that? Because I knew that Notre Dame was going to get preferential treatment in this thing. I'm not so sure that they couldn't lose another game and still make the college football playoff. I think you want them in a 12-team playoff. So I think they got preferential treatment, but are you surprised?
No, but this is proof of the brand name power is what I'm talking about. Notre Dame has an objectively, and people have asked about Texas. Texas actually has a strength of schedule, like, within the realm of like the other one-loss team. So it's kind of fair to have them where they are. Notre Dame has a strength of schedule based on the FPI at number 82, and in some cases down in the 90s, depending on the formula you use. Objectively, across every strength of schedule formula, they have a worse strength of schedule than BYU and Miami. They are 2 spots ahead of BYU. They are number 6. And I'm sorry, 2 spots ahead of Miami. They are number 6. Miami is number 8. And I believe they're 8 spots ahead of BYU, who's at number 14, but would still get in as the last conference champion to get in. I'm sorry, but if you're hanging your hat on a win at Texas A&M at the beginning of the year, they haven't done anything since, and they have a really bad loss to offset that in Northern Illinois. I'm not saying Notre Dame doesn't belong in the playoff. If you ask me to do my playoff rankings right now, Notre Dame would be in. There's no way based on this criteria that they're number 6 and hosting a playoff game in the first round, though. That makes no sense.
I agree. But you know they won a game there.
Oh, of course they won a game. The mystique of South Bend, and I mean, absolutely. But they should not be hosting a playoff game based on the stats right now.
Cooper Mays here. Second down.
Indiana's at 5, Army's at 19. Does this show conference bias? You and I may differ on this one a little bit because I do think Indiana would beat Army if they played.
I think it's resume based is what I'm talking about. And my issue with this resume is that their strength of schedules are both outside of the top 100. I don't have a problem with Indiana being ahead of Army. They should be ahead of Army. I don't have a problem with them being a few spots ahead of Army. I don't have a problem with them maybe being in and Army not being in. I do have a problem with Indiana being in and Army being down at number 19. I mean, I'm sorry. That's how are they number 5 and Army's at number 19? That's my issue. I'm sorry,
that's
but
conference bias. That's
conference bias. That's conference bias. It's not brand. It's conference bias. It's Indiana plays in the Big Ten. Army doesn't. That's the only thing that makes sense in this situation. So no, I have a big problem with that. That's a huge issue for me, and that's where that's why I have a problem with this.
And then there's recency bias that I don't really have a problem with.
Tennessee center Cooper Mays here. Third down.
Tennessee and Texas A&M, the lowest ranked 2-loss SEC teams. We know that Tennessee just lost to Georgia. I don't have as much of a problem with recency bias, to be real honest with you, because I think you're going to try to pick the teams that are playing their best at the end of the year. And if everything was equal and it's 2 10-2 teams and one lost 2 games in November, I'm just throwing this out there, and one lost their 2 games in September, I would go, all things being equal, I would go with the recency bias and take the team that's playing better at that time, wouldn't you?
Yes, but it also this is where eye test would have to come in with recency. Part of recency bias, Dave, just depends on when you play teams. I mean, so if you're going to say, let's go back to old school Tennessee in the 90s, okay, when they closed the year out against Vanderbilt and Kentucky, okay. Would you sit there and say, well, I'm going recency because Tennessee's looking better in November. They haven't lost, whereas Florida's lost a game in November, but Florida had to play Florida State in November. You know what I mean? Like, that's my issue with the recency bias. I get it with Texas A&M, fair, but I do have a problem with the Tennessee situation in the sense of, if you're going to say they're at the bottom, fine, but I think they're more being punished for having lost to Georgia. And by the way, Georgia's being punished. It's not just Tennessee in that situation. Georgia's number 10. They're being punished for having just lost. But Dave, Georgia has the toughest strength of schedule. I don't think they should be below Ole Miss or Alabama, even though both those teams beat them. I think Georgia's played such a tougher schedule.
Yeah, but it's head-to-head, man.
You can't do head-to-head.
Oh, it means something. Double D piping brings you 4 downs.
Double D Piping provides full-service fire protection on any scale. From residential homes to government facilities, we can assist any customer through design, fabrication, installation, inspection, and demonstration of fire suppression systems. With 30 years of service across 5 states and a full staff with over 40 years experience, our quality can't be beaten. Don't get caught watching what you could have prevented. Call Double D Piping, the absolute best in fire prevention.
All SEC center Cooper Mays here. 4th down.
All right, Coop, 4th down is this. Alabama 2 spots ahead of every 2-loss SEC team. Only team not to lose in November. That is recency bias once again. I don't have as much of a problem with that. I just don't. I think that Alabama is trending in the right direction with a new coach. They had to adapt to a new system. I think that Tennessee is, after the Georgia game, trending in the wrong direction, despite what they had done earlier, beating Kentucky, beating Florida, beating Alabama. So I don't have a problem with recency bias.
Yeah, see, I have a problem with recency bias in this situation. Okay. Majorly so, because we have to look at this. Yeah, Alabama's looking better since they played in November. Who have they played since they played Tennessee?
Nobody. Mercer,
LSU, an LSU team that turned out to not be good.
It's quitting on its coach.
So now you can maybe say they were good when they played Alabama, and Alabama beating them is why they're quitting on their coach. That's a fair assessment, because Alabama did beat the brakes off them. But okay, Alabama hasn't played another 2-loss SEC team in November. Ole Miss has had to play Georgia. Georgia's had to play Tennessee. Tennessee's had to play Georgia. And Georgia's had to play Ole Miss. So, Dave, when you think about it, Georgia's had to play 2-loss SEC teams back-to-back that are currently 2 losses. Tennessee had to play Georgia. Ole Miss had to play Georgia. I just think that when they've all had to play each other, and Alabama's sitting pretty, having not played any of these teams since mid-October, and in their most recent one having lost to them, which was Tennessee, how can you say they're peaking at the right time? Are they peaking at the right time, or has their schedule just gotten easier?
Probably a little bit of both.